My name is Emily Carter, and the day my life changed forever was supposed to be a celebration. It was my mother's birthday, a day filled with laughter, balloons, fancy dinners, and champagne glasses clinking together in our big dining hall. Everyone in my family was there: my father, my older sister Rachel, uncles, aunts, even neighbors who adored my parents for their so-called generosity, and me, the invisible daughter. For as long as I can remember, I had always been the shadow. In that family, Rachel was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the princess who was showered with love, gifts, and attention, and me, I was tolerated at best, ignored most of the time, criticized for everything else. But despite all that, I wanted my mom's birthday to be special. I had saved for weeks from my part-time job at a coffee shop. While Rachel had her luxury credit card and limitless shopping trips, I scraped tips together and worked extra shifts. My gift wasn't flashy. It wasn't diamonds or designer perfume. It was a photo album. I had spent hours collecting old pictures of our family, the rare moments where we all looked happy. Vacations, birthdays, silly little snapshots where we were smiling. Even if those smiles were sometimes fake, I decorated each page by hand, wrote little notes under each picture. It wasn't expensive, but it was filled with love. When it was finally time to give gifts, I handed the album to my mom, my heart pounding. For 1 second, just 1 second, I hoped she would see it for what it was: a daughter's love. Wrapped in paper and ribbon, she opened it, flipped through a couple of pages, and then she laughed. Not the kind of laugh that fills a room with joy. No, it was a cruel, sharp laugh, like a knife cutting through me. "Emily," she said, holding up the album so everyone could see, "you bring me this scrapbook on my birthday?" The room chuckled with her. Rachel rolled her eyes, sipping her champagne. And then my mom said the words that burned into my soul forever: "The best gift you can give me, Emily, is to leave my life, disappear. That would make me happier than anything else." The room fell silent after that. Some people chuckled nervously. My father smirked like it was a joke. Rachel looked at me with that smug, victorious face she always wore. But me, I froze, my cheeks burned, my hands trembled, and I felt like the floor had just opened beneath me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to beg her to take it back, but instead, I just nodded quietly, and I excused myself from the table. Nobody followed me. Nobody asked if I was okay. That night, while the party roared on downstairs, I packed a single suitcase in my room. And before the sun rose, I was gone. I didn't leave a note. I didn't text anyone. I didn't even take much money. I had less than $100 in my wallet. I bought a bus ticket to a city 2 hours away, and that was it. No plan, no home, no family, just me and the crushing weight of my mother's words. "The best gift you can give me is to leave my life." So I gave her that gift. For weeks, I lived in cheap motels, sometimes sleeping in the break room of the diner where I found a job. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I can count. But you know what? It was also the first time I felt free. No judgment, no constant comparisons to Rachel. No mother rolling her eyes at everything I did. Just me, building something, anything from scratch. Life was cruel at first. Rent was high, bills piled up, and some nights I skipped meals just to get by. But I worked hard, first as a waitress, then as an assistant in an office. Slowly, piece by piece, I started to climb. Every dollar I saved was like a brick in the foundation of a new Emily. And every time I wanted to quit, every time the world felt too heavy, I remembered her words: "The best gift you can give me is to leave my life." Those words stopped breaking me. They started fueling me. I swore that one day, I would return. Not as the invisible daughter, not as the family embarrassment. I would return stronger, richer, and more powerful than they could ever imagine. And on that day, my mother would regret the birthday wish she had spoken into existence. The first year after I vanished was the hardest year of my life. I was 18, alone, broke, and terrified. I bounced from cheap room rentals to dingy motels, sometimes sleeping in bus stations when I couldn't scrape enough money together. I learned how cruel the world could be to a girl on her own. Landlords who tried to take advantage, managers who paid late, knowing I had no one to back me up, strangers who thought my silence made me an easy target. But I also learned something else about myself. I was tougher than I thought. Every morning, no matter how much I cried the night before, I got up and went to work. At first it was waitressing in a diner where the grease clung to my clothes, and my feet ached from double shifts. Then I picked up odd jobs cleaning offices at night, babysitting on weekends, even handing out flyers on busy streets. My body was exhausted, my soul was bruised, but my spirit refused to break. And every night, when I collapsed into whatever bed I had managed to rent for the week, my mother's voice rang in my head, "The best gift you can give me is to leave my life." Fine. I thought, I've given you that gift, but one day, Mom, you'll regret asking for it. Eventually, I found something stable. A small accounting firm downtown needed a receptionist. It didn't pay much, but it was clean work, steady hours, and most importantly, it introduced me to a world I had never known, the world of business. I watched the accountants and managers walk in with tailored suits and confident strides, speaking a language I barely understood: numbers, investments, profits, losses. It was like another planet. But I was curious. When I finished my work at the front desk, I stayed late. I asked questions. I borrowed books from the office library, taught myself the basics of finance, and practiced spreadsheets on the old computer they gave me. I wasn't just working for a paycheck anymore. I was learning. I was preparing. And slowly, my curiosity turned into skill. My managers noticed. They promoted me from receptionist to assistant, and later to junior bookkeeper. It wasn't glamorous, but it was progress. For the first time, I felt like I was moving forward step by step toward a future that was mine, not the scraps my family had thrown me. On my mother's next birthday, exactly 1 year after I vanished, I sat in my tiny apartment with a pen and a blank card. I wrote, "Dear Mom, happy birthday. You said the best gift I could give you was leaving your life. I hope you're enjoying it. Love, Emily." I stared at it for a long time, imagining her face if she ever received it. Then I tore it up and threw it away. Not yet. She didn't deserve the satisfaction of knowing I was still thinking about her. Not until the time was right. By the time I turned 21, I was no longer scraping by. I had saved enough to enroll in night classes for business management. During the day, I worked full-time. At night, I studied. It was brutal, but it paid off. I graduated with honors, and soon after, I landed a job at an investment firm. That's when everything changed for the first time. I wasn't just watching other people succeed. I was learning how to make money work for me. I absorbed everything: stocks, real estate, startups. I asked questions most people were too afraid to ask. I took risks others hesitated to take. And slowly but surely, my bank account began to grow. I invested in small properties, flipped them, and reinvested the profits. I put money into rising companies. Some failed, but others paid off big. By 25, I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And with every dollar I earned, the fire inside me grew. Because while I built my new life, I kept an eye on my old one. I never called them. They never called me. It was as if I had truly vanished. But through whispers from old acquaintances, the internet, and the occasional slip from distant relatives, I learned bits and pieces. Rachel was still the golden child, flaunting her perfect life on social media. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, the works. But I noticed the cracks. Her husband was rarely in the pictures anymore. Rumors of infidelity floated around. My father's business, once a booming construction company, had started to struggle. After a few bad investments, lawsuits, layoffs, debts piling up, and my mother, the queen of her little social circle, her health was declining. She had developed a reputation for being bitter, sharp-tongued, and demanding. Fewer people attended her lavish parties. Friends were slipping away. They were crumbling. And I was rising. The more I saw their world cracking, the more I remembered that night. The photo album in my trembling hands, the laughter, my mother's cruel words. "The best gift you can give me is to leave my life." She thought she was destroying me. She thought I would vanish into nothingness. Instead, I had become stronger than she could ever imagine. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to live well. I wasn't just going to succeed quietly. I was going to make them pay, one by one, piece by piece. I would take away everything they cherished until all they had left was the memory of the daughter they threw away, and when the moment was right, I would come back. Not as Emily the forgotten daughter, but as Emily, the storm they never saw coming. I knew I couldn't just walk back into their lives and announce myself. That would be too easy. Too merciful, no, I wanted them to feel the absence. They demanded from me, I wanted them to know what life without me really meant. And then, when they were at their weakest, I would return not as the girl they discarded, but as someone far beyond their reach. The first step was gathering information. I needed to know everything about them, where they lived, what they owned, what they owed, who they pretended to be in front of others, and what secrets they tried to bury. I hired a private investigator under an alias, and soon, reports started flooding in. Rachel, the golden child, had a marriage that looked perfect from the outside but was rotting inside. Her husband was drowning in gambling debts, and their house, one that had been a wedding gift from my parents, was actually mortgaged to the hilt. Rachel was so desperate to maintain her image that she was secretly pawning jewelry and begging her friends for money behind closed doors. My father's company was worse than I imagined. Years of arrogance and risky ventures had left it barely standing. Subcontractors were suing for unpaid bills, employees were quitting, and the government was sniffing around for tax irregularities. His empire, the one he always bragged about, building with his bare hands, was one bad deal away from collapse. And my mother, the same woman who told me to disappear, she was unraveling. Her health had worsened. Yes, but so had her reputation. Once the star of every dinner party, she was now known as controlling, bitter, and impossible to please. Old friends avoided her calls. She spent hours online criticizing others, desperately clinging to an image that was slipping through her fingers. I smiled as I read the reports. They were weak, fragile, and desperate. Exactly where I wanted them. I started small, quiet, invisible moves that pushed them further into chaos without revealing my hand. Rachel's husband had been trying to hide his gambling from her with one carefully placed email. I exposed his debts to her in the most humiliating way possible during one of her charity luncheons. Her perfect little world cracked that day, and everyone saw it. My father was trying to secure a major loan to keep his company afloat. I bought just enough shares through dummy corporations to block the deal, leaving him scrambling. To the world, it looked like bad luck. To me, it was the first domino falling. And my mother, I didn't touch her at first. I wanted her to feel the sting of loneliness, the gnawing realization that even as her world collapsed, the daughter she had pushed away wasn't there to help. Every time she looked around and saw Rachel in tears or my father raging at the bank, I wanted her to wonder, just for a second, if I could have saved them, if only she hadn't thrown me away. The more they stumbled, the more I grew. By now, I was wealthy, powerful, and surrounded by people who respected me for my skills, not my last name. And for the first time, I allowed myself to picture the moment. The moment when I would walk back into their lives and watch their jaws drop, as they realized the girl they had dismissed had become the woman who now controlled their fate. But not yet. They hadn't suffered enough. So I waited, and I planned, because revenge isn't about striking when you're angry. It's about striking when your enemies believe they've already lost everything, only to discover you're the one pulling the strings that destroyed them. And soon, very soon, I would make my move. The first person I decided to break was Rachel. For as long as I could remember, she was the one held above me in every way. She got the dresses, the cars, the vacations, the applause. I was the shadow to her spotlight, the mistake compared to her perfection. If my mother was the queen, Rachel was her heir, so it only felt right that my revenge began with her.
Her husband's gambling debts were deeper than anyone knew, and he had already borrowed money from some very dangerous people. I made sure those debts became public knowledge. Anonymous tips to her social circle, whispers at the right events, screenshots of his losses sent to her closest friends. Overnight, Rachel's perfect marriage was the subject of gossip. She tried to keep up appearances, posting pictures of dinners and vacations, but people weren't fooled anymore. They looked at her and saw desperation. Then I made sure the financial cracks widened. I bought the debt her husband owed, quietly becoming his creditor through layers of companies. When the time was right, I demanded repayment. He couldn't pay, of course, and suddenly the house Rachel boasted about was at risk of foreclosure. The jewellery she flaunted, the designer bags, the parties, all gone piece by piece. And the best part? She had no idea it was me pulling the strings. Next, I turned my focus to my father. He had built his image as a self-made man, a titan of industry. But the truth was, his empire was fragile, and I was ready to topple it. Through my investments, I had gained quiet control over some of the companies he depended on. I didn't need to ruin him with a single blow. I just had to cut off his lifelines one at a time. He needed a major loan to cover his debts. I made sure the bank turned him down. He needed a contract renewed with one of his suppliers. I outbid him through a shell company and took it for myself. Each time, he blamed luck, the economy, or his enemies. Never once did he suspect that his forgotten daughter was orchestrating his downfall. And then there was my mother. I saved her for last because I wanted her to feel every second of the storm building around her. I wanted her to watch her golden child lose everything, to see her husband stumble and fall, to feel her perfect world collapse before I even laid a hand on her directly. When I finally did, it wasn't with fire or fury. It was with silence. I bought the house she lived in. Quietly, through proxies, I took ownership of the very place she had raised us, the place where she told me I was nothing. And when the papers were finalized, I sent her one letter, simple and cold. Happy birthday. Mom, you once said the best gift I could give you was to leave your life. I did. And now you're leaving mine. You have 30 days to vacate the property. I imagined her face when she read it, her hands shaking, her pride cracking in half. The Queen had no throne anymore. The night I drove past the house, watching the movers carry out the last of her furniture, I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I just watched from a distance, the way I had always been forced to watch her favour Rachel over me. But this time, I was the one with the power. And still, I didn't reveal myself. That was the sweetest part of it all. They didn't even know who was behind the wreckage of their lives. They just felt the walls closing in, the world turning against them, and the slow, gnawing realization that maybe, just maybe, they had brought it on themselves. But the story wasn't over. No, I wasn't finished yet. I wanted a finale, a moment so sharp, so undeniable, that they would never again be able to forget me. So I began to plan the night I would return. I chose my moment carefully. My mother's 60th birthday was coming up, and of course Rachel insisted on throwing a grand celebration despite her own crumbling life. I made sure the venue was available for rent, then bought it under one of my companies, which meant every detail of that night, every candle, every bottle of champagne, every invitation was under my control. They thought it would be an evening of glamour, a chance to reclaim some shred of dignity. Little did they know it would become the stage for their final humiliation. I arrived late, dressed in a gown that glittered like diamonds under the chandeliers. No one recognized me at first. To them, I was just another guest, a stranger with confidence in her stride. I stood in the corner, sipping wine, watching as Rachel tried to charm guests who whispered behind her back. My father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, stress carving lines into his once proud face, and my mother, still holding her head, high, pretending she ruled the room. When the time came for speeches, I made my move. I walked to the stage, my heels clicking against the marble floor. People turned, their chatter dying into silence. I took the microphone from the host, my heart steady, my voice clear. Good evening. I don't believe many of you know me, but you should. I'm Emily Carter. Yes, that Emily. The forgotten one. The daughter who was told she wasn't good enough. Who was pushed aside, who was asked to disappear. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother's face went pale. My father froze and Rachel's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. I smiled. For years, I did exactly as you asked. I vanished. I built a life away from your cruelty. But while I was gone, I also built something else. Power, wealth, freedom. And then, one day, I decided to give you all a taste of what you gave me. I turned toward Rachel first. Rachel, how does it feel to be the subject of whispers instead of applause? To have your marriage, your home, your status crumble? That wasn't chance. That was me. Her lips trembled, her eyes darting wildly as the truth sank in. Then I looked at my father. Dad, the great self-made man. How does it feel to lose? Deals, to watch your empire rot from the inside. Every contract you lost, every door slammed in your face, that was me. He clenched his fists, but he didn't speak. He couldn't. The crowd was watching, and his empire was already in ruins. Finally, I faced my mother. And you. The woman who told me that the best gift I could give you was to leave your life. So I did. But I came back bearing gifts of my own. That house you loved so much, mine. The respect you clung to, gone. And this party tonight, you're standing in my building, drinking my wine, smiling under my lights. Every piece of this evening belongs to me. The silence in the room was heavy, every guest holding their breath. My mother's mask finally cracked. Her voice was sharp, desperate. How dare you humiliate us like this, after everything we did for you? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everything you did to me, you mean? You ignored me, belittled me, abandoned me. You left me with nothing, and now I've returned the favor. You have nothing. No wealth, no power, no respect. Just the memory of what you lost. And every time you think about it, you'll think of me. I handed the microphone back and stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted like water, no one daring to stop me. Behind me, I heard the murmurs, the gasps, the judgment turning on them now. For once, they were the spectacle, and I was the one walking away with dignity. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. I felt lighter, freer, as if years of pain had finally lifted. My revenge was complete, not with violence, but with truth, power, and the one thing they could never control. Me. As I slipped into the waiting car, I looked back at the glowing building one last time. They wanted me gone from their lives. Now, they would spend the rest of their days wishing I'd stayed, and that was the sweetest revenge of all.